I'm older than Don. I gave up a whole nother life, and you know, I was making pretty good money, and I went there and made $125 a week and lived in one room. But I loved it. I had enough money because I was doing what I loved. I didn't have to. My life was my entertainment. And you know, the biggest thing, I just run into a friend of mine who's in the Songwriter Hall of Fame. I said, "Are you writing much?" He says, "No, I hate it." And the reason why he hates it is that he treated it like a job, in that he wrote to get cuts, and he took his eye off the ball, and he forgot why he loved it. And God bless them, guys like Tom Paxton and Don and I think we're having more fun now.
Yeah.
You know, we're doing a record, and we're writing for us. And, you know, we're lucky. We had some success. And I mean, people will say, how you get your songs cut? We don't know anymore. I mean, seriously, we don't know, because it's changed so much. It was very different when we were really lucky to be in a time when you could actually pick songs and get them recorded. Now it's like everybody wants a piece of it. It does happen. Don had a song recorded a while ago. I haven't gotten some cuts, but it's difficult. So that's basically my story, and you know, I've been writing there I've been in Nashville for 30 years, wrote for Warner Chappell, he wrote for Tree and CBS, and luckily, you know, we get to do stuff like this. We love this. I mean, this is like the top of the tier. So, Tom?
I started writing songs because I found I could. I couldn't paint. I was a drama student at the University of Oklahoma, and I loved acting. But I knew in my heart that I was, you know, a good amateur actor, period. There was no real upside for me there. And then all that time I was learning folk songs from people like Burl Ives and the Weavers, and then I discovered Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie. And folk music was my passion. Traditional folk music. It put me in touch with people I'd never known, but who had feelings like myself. I learned Scottish folk songs. I learned English folk songs, Appalachian folk songs, cowboy songs. They all spoke to me. And then one day, I guess I was a sophomore at OU. The back row of a Shakespeare class, I wrote a song. And I'm ashamed of myself because I loved Shakespeare. And I don't know why I took that day off, but I wrote my first song. And about 10 years ago, maybe a little longer, I put out a songbook of my stuff. There were about 80 songs in there. And in the introduction, I printed the lyric to my first song, which is one of the 3 or 4 worst songs in the English language. I mean, it was phony as a $3 bill. It was an Elizabethan murder ballad. And I have no idea what the melody was, but of course, my friends thought it was wonderful. Never trust your friends or family about whether your stuff is any good, because they will lie in their because they love you. So this song is really awful. So I printed it because I wanted people, aspiring songwriters, to say, well, if he could write this piece of shit and go on to write good songs, there's hope for me. So I was, there's this kind of cloud of unknowing that surrounds us beginning songwriters. It keeps us from realizing how our stuff sucks. So I was inspired by having written that song. I went on to write, I must have been 50 more songs, some of which I thought were really hot, before one day at the clerk typist school in Fort Dix, New Jersey, where I was soon to be the honor graduate, I may tell you. I don't have that on my curriculum vitae, but it ought to be there. Was honor graduate of the 1960 clerk typist. On the Army's typewriter, there was a typing class that we had to take, being clerk typists. And the Army didn't care whether you already knew how to type or not. You were there to learn to type. Well, about 6 of us could have passed the final the first day. So I went through some of the exercises, and finally I just gave it up, and I used the typewriter to write letters home and write some, beat poems and stuff. And then one day, on the Army's typewriter, I wrote the lyric to a song of mine called The Marvelous Toy, which became a children's favorite. You probably had to suffer through this in grade school. It went zip when it moved and bop when it stopped and whirr when it stood still. So I had that song, and that song only, really, when right after I got out of the Army, I was at the Gaslight Cafe in Greenwich Village early in the evening, and a classical guitarist named John Stauber came in, and he said, "You ought to go up to Columbia Management tomorrow. There's auditions. They're replacing one of the original members of the Chad Mitchell Trio, which was a up-and-coming pop folk trio." So I went up there, and I auditioned, and they chose me provisionally. They said, we'll work for a week and see how it goes. So we worked for a week, and unfortunately it didn't go. My voice didn't blend with theirs, and so they had to let me go. But in the meantime, during a break, I had sung The Marvelous Toy for them. And it turned out they loved the song, and much more importantly, their musical director was a man named Milt Oken. Milt just died in November. He was in his 90s. Milt became my mentor and sponsor. I was with him for 50 years as a publisher. I was the first person he signed to Cherry Lane Music and stayed with him until it ended. He said he got the bad news. He had to deliver the news that I wasn't going to be a part of the trio, but he said, "We love the song. I would like to publish the song, and I'd be very interested in hearing anything else you wrote." And so that began my experience with Milt. It turned out to be the biggest break I ever had in my career was my association with Milt Oken, because he was producing not just the Chad Mitchell Trio, but then he was the producer for Peter, Paul and Mary and John Denver and for a great many other artists. And he would take my songs and put them with these artists on their albums. So right from the beginning, I was getting cuts. I think, depending on how you define hit, I've had 10 hit songs. Not a single one of those recordings was the result of a pitch. I have never successfully pitched a song to anybody. They just happened. People would hear the song. Cowboy Jack Clement heard me sing the Last Thing on My Mind at the Gaslight. Went right back down to Nashville and cut it with Dolly Parton and Porter Wagner. It was their first hit. I had no idea. Norman Petty heard Bottle of Wine and cut it with the Fireballs. That's the kind of thing that happened a lot back then. I don't think it happens so much now. John's right. It's difficult to get stuff cut because most of the time, certainly in Nashville, you have to write with the artist. The artist co-writes and sometimes doesn't even write but gets credit.
Very painful experience.
Yeah. So that's the way that goes. But for me, I was so much in love with music. I couldn't believe that I was working as a folk singer starting in 1960. The first year I was in New York, I'm sure I sang at least 3 songs to a paying audience, 350 nights. I didn't do anything else. If I went to a movie, it was in the afternoon. If I went to a play, it was a matinee. Every night I was in the village. And I say 350 nights, I probably got paid for 50 of them. The rest of the time I would get a cheeseburger or something. But I did not care. I slept on sofas. For the first couple of years I was in New York. I was so in love with this that it's all I needed. So I wrote and wrote and wrote. Poor Milt, I would call him at 10 o'clock at night and sing him a new song. And he was a saint, He never said, "Call me during business hours," which a sane man would have done. But writing songs has always been what I love the most. And the more I wrote, the more I grew to love the procedure, the process. I grew to love rewriting. Rewriting is where the real writing is. We spill stuff out on a first draft, and then we work on it. Now, there are people who will say, my songs come from God. and who am I to edit God? But there's a story about the guy who's working in his garden, and he senses that he's being observed, and he looks, and standing on the neighboring wall looking into the garden is the new pastor, who looks around the garden and said, "Isn't it remarkable what God has done?"
Yeah.
And the guy said, "Yeah, and you should have seen it when just God had it." So as there's a motto of one of the International Writers Organization's pen. It says, "Don't write, rewrite." That's where it all starts. And then when you fall in love with that part of the process, you're over a very big hump. You've separated yourself from the amateur, which I was for a long time, and you become a professional. You start looking at your own love child on the page there and say, "You ain't done yet." When you pick up the guitar and you sing through a song for the first time, there are little road bumps in there, little speed bumps. And some of us will leave those bumps where they are and just kind of get past them when we sing a song for somebody. The rest of us will say, "It ain't yet. It ain't done. It ain't done until it's done." When it goes right from the first to the last, and you feel good about the whole, then you've got a song. So I love the process of songwriting. I love coming back to songs. If I get an idea for a song, I have software in my iPad for songwriting. I'll write down on a brand new page whatever I've got. And if that's all I've got, then I'll go on and do something else. But I come back and say, "Oh, I forgot that I even wrote this, but let me see where it goes." And so when you're that much into the process of songwriting, you can find yourself a happy person.
Thank you.
Could you define
I
that
sold
process?
out last night, and I was behind the curve, so I didn't hear it until it was too late. Please
Sing a song?
Please.
Yes, I will, but not yet.
Not whenever.
Not yet.
Yes.
Not yet.
Okay.
Yes, we'll do songs.
You were talking about the process. Can you define that a little bit?
Okay. What to write? What the hell am I going to write? Blank page, blank screen, nothing there. What do I start with? I can give you one technique that always works for me, and that is to pick up the paper, go through the paper or the news magazine, whatever, and find anything that moves you in any way.